Good morning on this historic Monday, April 15th, 2024. The criminal trial against Donald Trump is happening. It's happening in just a few moments. I'm here with Karen Friedman Agnifilo, who will be providing coverage throughout this criminal trial for Donald Trump's fraudulent business records in connection with his attempts to try to interfere with the results of the 2016 election. A lot to discuss, of course, over the weekend. Donald Trump, as expected, threw a tantrum post after post after post. Stranger than the next. Donald Trump was posting over the weekend. Just 4 years ago, I was a very popular and successful president of the United States, getting more votes than any sitting president in history. Tomorrow morning, I'll be in criminal court before a totally conflicted judge, a corrupt prosecutor, a legal system in chaos. He then talks about that this is, quote, rigging the system. And then he finishes off by saying, MAGA 2024, see you tomorrow. And he was not very popular at all, but like everything Donald Trump says, all total lies. He then decided that he wanted to post about his very bizarre ownership and dangerous ownership over the Miss Universe pageant, where he says, I owned the Miss Universe pageant for 19 years, did very well with it, sold it to IMG at a great profit, and ran for president. It was a contest like no other, but now I have one that's even better. Who is the worst, most evil, and most corrupt judge? Then he goes on and lists judges and says, or Judge Juan Merchan, is he the worst? Just as strange as you get. And then he posts Judge Juan Merchan, perhaps the most highly conflicted judge in New York State history, only gave us a short period of time to read and study hundreds of thousands of pages of documents that DA Alvin Bragg illegally hid, disguised, and held back from us, of course. And as the judge knows, we need far more time than that. Karen Friedman Agnifilo, all lies, all whining, reeks of desperation. Can you frame, though, the historical moment of today of this criminal trial? And, this is the office, the Manhattan District Attorney's Office that you worked in for nearly 30 years, that you led. You rose to the ranks of number 2 in that office. So it also must be an incredibly proud moment for you as well to see the office take center stage, one of the most important and powerful legal offices, if not the most in the United States, take center stage. Karen, mic is yours.
Yeah, the Manhattan DA's office has always been at the cutting edge of anything. I mean, whether it's being on the forefront of changing laws or doing things in a really innovative or creative way that people would follow suit. It's always been considered one of the best prosecution offices in the country under Robert Morgenthau, who was a long-term DA, under Frank Hogan before that, and Thomas Dewey before that, and Cy Vance, and now Alvin Bragg. So this is really watching my old office shine and be the office that it always has been. It's able to attract the best of the best. They have the highest ethical standards. They follow the facts wherever they lead without fear or favor. That's like a mantra that is ingrained in every single person who's there. Supreme Court judges have come from there. Judge Sonia Sotomayor started at the Manhattan DA's office. I can't tell you, countless governors, senators, congresspeople, just so many people started at the Manhattan DA's office. And it's really just an excellent, excellent place. And I, of course, feel honored that I got to be there for 3 decades and really was trained by the best of the best. And so this is just an example of the Manhattan DA's office being what it is. It is taking on a case that is, it's interesting because people talk about it as this is historic. It's the first former president or presidential candidate who's being prosecuted criminally. And they were the first indictment, and that everybody was kind of hesitating who's going to go first. And the Manhattan DA's office had no problem going first. And prior to that, prosecuted successfully the Trump Organization in November of 2022. I think it was. Can't keep track of years anymore. 17 count tax case, tax conviction. And it's an office that's always never shied away from big cases and powerful people. They don't get intimidated. It's truly, if the case is worth it and worthwhile, and they bring it, period, full stop. So yes, I'm beyond proud that this is happening. And it's interesting watching people talk about this case that's starting today, watching them talk about it. And it's people are starting to come around. You see a lot of blogs and people on Twitter, also a ton of op-eds, and even just some reporting in newspapers and in the press. And there's still some people out there who are saying, why this case? This is a weak case. Why does this have to be the one who goes first? It's just a hush money case. And Ben, I was doing some research and really reading up on the law and preparing myself so that I can provide commentary for this next week, for this historic trial. I was reading a brand new book that came out. A good friend of mine, Norm Eisen, who is also a frequent commentator, and he's been a guest on Legal AF. He came out with, he was preparing his trial notebook for this case, and he thought, I'm going to turn it into a book, and published it. And I helped read it and edit it a little bit for him. And I was reading, I was rereading it, and in it talked about, he reminded me that Donald Trump won the 2016 election by 80,000 votes in 3 swing states. Okay. It was 3 swing states, and 80,000 votes made the difference. That's a tiny, tiny number. And when you put yourself back in 2016 and you think about the desperation that we're going to hear about from people like Hope Hicks and Kellyanne Conway, who are going to testify for the prosecution at this trial. And they're going to bring us back to 2016, where Donald Trump's campaign was absolutely reeling from the release of the Access Hollywood tape, where he talked about grabbing women by their genitals forcibly. And he was desperately trying to keep more bad information from the press because he was worried he would not win. And this was before, by the way, that now we know so much about Donald Trump and how the E. Jean Carroll case alone brought so much to light. But we know so much more now, but back then it wasn't as widely known. And so they were desperate to keep this out of the press. And so we're going to hear about that. And we're going to hear how they concocted this scheme to catch and kill the bad stories and pay women off so that these stories wouldn't come to light. And it dawned on me, what if this is the case? Because he did catch and kill the Stormy Daniels story and the Karen McDougal story, right? And what if that is what made the difference of why he won the election? If that's the case, and look, there's no conclusive proof. You're not going to go and interview every voter, et cetera. But I think there's a strong argument to be made that was so powerful to keep that out of the media. That could have made the difference in why he won the election and why he's president. And so unlike January 6th and the violent insurrection and that where he tried to steal that election, at least that was more sensational. That was more dramatic, but at least he didn't win, right? Thank God he did not win the second time he tried to steal the election. But this is the first time he may have actually successfully done it. And obviously look at all the things that happened as a result, right? He was able to appoint Supreme Court justices. He was able to, and then therefore they overturned Roe versus Wade. And I mean, that's just one dramatic example. There's so many things we could talk about that happened as a result of him winning the election that has not made our country better. It's made it far, far worse, and has taken away rights from people. It has really set us back in so many ways. And so I'm starting to actually believe and feel that this is the most important of the criminal cases. I mean, it's kind of tied with Mar-a-Lago because stealing nuclear secrets is really, that's the one that I think is just absolutely one of the worst crimes of my lifetime, that somebody would take our nation's most powerful documents and keep them so unsafely, and God only knows what else he did with them. And then, of course, how do you compare it to the other two indictments about the 2020 election and the January 6th insurrection is obviously very important too. So it's hard to say which one's more important, but to say this one is not as important, at least, I think, is really missing the boat. And that's what we're going to see in this trial. I think that's what you're going to see happen when they open. The opening statement is going to talk about really what this case was about, that this was an effort to influence the 2016 election. And that's what the evidence is going to prove, in addition to false documents, et cetera. So jury selection starts today, and they are going to bring in hundreds of jurors who are going to have received their summons, and they are going to work together, the prosecution and the defense, to find who can be fair and impartial in this case. You're not going to look for Trump supporters or Biden supporters. And by the way, just speaking of Biden, I want to clarify something. These desperate tweets that Trump sent out yesterday clearly panicked that this trial is starting, and a clear indication that this trial is starting. He talks about Joe Biden, and he talks about how Joe Biden, how somehow this had to do with Biden and this fake Biden trial, and that this is a Biden conspiracy. I just want to set the record straight. First of all, Alvin Bragg is an elected district attorney, elected by the people of Manhattan, and he has nothing to do with Joe Biden. This is a state case. If Donald Trump is convicted here, he will not be able to pardon himself, nor will any other president be able to pardon him. This is a state conviction if he's convicted. It literally has nothing to do with Joe Biden. The Manhattan DA's office has nothing to do with him. Same with Judge Merchan. He's a state court judge. I think he's appointed by the mayor and elevated as an acting Supreme, or or maybe he's a court of claims judge appointed by the governor. Either way, he has nothing to do with Joe Biden. Okay, so I don't know why Donald Trump is trying to do that and make it so that that he spreads this lie that it has anything to do with Joe Biden. Anyway. So what we're going to be doing, me and you, Ben, is we're going to be getting a feed from people who are in the courtroom. We're going to be monitoring the stuff that people are putting out who are in the courtroom. And we are going to provide actual information that is based and rooted on the truth about what happens in court. Because Donald Trump, as we know from prior trials, likes to come out and give speeches and lie about what happened in court. And although they're not allowing cameras, they're sort of onto him. So in addition to not letting cameras in the courtroom, they're also not letting cameras in the hallway. So that way he can't give speeches during breaks. I expect that he'll give a speech on the courtroom steps in the morning, before he goes in, during lunch, and again, probably at the end of the day. But throughout the day, he's not going to be able to do that. So hopefully, Ben, me and you can just be the truth tellers and explain to people what actually happened, what he's saying is a lie, and we can interpret it for them, since I obviously am familiar with that courtroom.
Given that familiarity with the courtroom, can you describe what a typical day is going to be like, not just for the prosecution and the lawyers, but for Donald Trump? Because he's really in for a rude awakening here. This is not like a civil case where he could kind of prance in whenever he wants, because there's no obligation that a civil defendant has to sit there during the trial until and unless they have to testify. what is a day going to be looking like for Donald Trump? And again, as you mentioned, there are a lot of safeguards here as well to avoid the propaganda and the chaos, and to keep this and to keep the decorum and the seriousness of this proceeding in place, including no pool video cameras in the hallways. There are reporters who can be there, but Trump can't do those in courtroom press conference. What's the day going to be like for him? And do you think he's going to be able to handle that, and when the reality is going to set in?
So look, the three desperate sounding tweets that he sent out didn't violate the gag orders. So I think that was an indication to me that he realizes that the trial is starting, and he's being careful not to violate the gag order, at least in those tweets, because he's allowed to talk about the DA and the judge. So I think he recognizes, and I think his lawyers have explained to him exactly that a criminal case is nothing like a civil case when it comes to the fact that the defendant has to be present the whole time, because there are certain due process rights and obligations that attach, and he has to be present for things. He has to consent to certain things. He has to be there. So he will be expected to be there. Court usually starts around 9:30 every day. Sometimes if the court starts late, it's going to be because maybe there's a juror missing, maybe whatever. So there's a lot of downtime sometimes with court, and that can be frustrating to people. But you can't do anything until all the jurors are seated and in the box. And so he's going to have to be there at 9:30 every day. Lunch is from 1 to 2:15 every single day, like clockwork, in every one of the courtrooms of 100 Center Street, which is the building that this is taking place in. And it usually ends around 4:30 in the afternoon. Because there's a jury present, the judge is going to be extremely, extremely diligent, making sure that nothing inappropriate gets to the jury. And it's not just about safety of the jurors. Like, in other words, they're going to be anonymous to us because there are safety concerns. But in addition to that, any judge will protect the jury from extraneous, irrelevant, inadmissible information, because they really should only they can only hear relevant, admissible evidence in a case, right? Judge Engoron was much more liberal about allowing Donald Trump to give speeches and be dramatic and talk about all kinds of things that had nothing to do with the trial, because there's no jury present. So he didn't have to worry about that. He could just give himself a curative instruction to not consider the things that are inappropriate and irrelevant, and make sure that nothing that they're not supposed to hear, they hear. He's going to do things like make facial expressions, and he's going to gesture and that sort of thing, and harumph when things, or if he thinks someone's lying, he's going to shake his head. He's going to do a lot of that. The judge will admonish him and tell him to stop. If he has any outbursts, the judge will also admonish him, and he could be held in contempt. That's going to be the interesting thing, is what will the judge do when he inevitably acts out, whether it's outside of court, where he attacks witnesses and therefore could be in violation of the gag order, or if it's in court, if he tries any shenanigans. We know he's walked out of courtrooms before when things happen that he doesn't like. It's going to be tricky if he does that there. I think we're going to hear the judge. I would suspect the judge is going to start the day giving Trump an instruction. It's called a Parker warning. And it's basically that if you voluntarily absent yourself from court, the trial can and will go on without you, so that that can't be a delay, even though he's ordered to be there. And look, what normally happens if a defendant refuses to come is the judge puts him in and puts him in jail and forces him to be there. And so it's going to be very interesting to see what will happen, because Judge Merchan is not going to let him delay the trial.
And Karen, there's actually a jail cell, right? Right, was it behind the courtroom or adjacent to the courtroom where
Yes.
if people act up, it's a very quick trip from Donald Trump's seat at the defense table or the
Yeah.
defendant's table to that jail cell. You've been in that courtroom. Can you describe that?
Yeah, so people, it's a holding cell. It's not in the courtroom. It's in there's a door in the back of the courtroom that leads to the internal workings of the building, and that's where all incarcerated defendants, they come into the building through um, they come into the building through a different entrance, and then they get put in holding cells depending on where their courtroom is, and then they get brought out to attend their court appearances. So there's a whole kind of maze of hallways and jail cells and elevators and everything that's in the innards of the building that is not that the public have no clue about, because the public enters through the downstairs entrance from the street, and they go through magnetometers and take public elevators, and then they enter the courtroom from the back of, or from the front of the courtroom, right? And they go in and they sit in the seats, and that's where lawyers enter from, etc. But Donald Trump is going to enter through the public entrance. But if he gets put in one of those jail cells in the back, a holding cell, which to me is that's the last straw, because there's no way Judge Merchan is sending him to Rikers Island. That's not happening, right? So if he gets held in contempt, the real nuclear option could be that Judge Merchan puts him in the back and puts him in a holding cell and basically holds him there for the day. There's no way he's going to stay overnight. He holds him there for the day or a few hours until he calms down and promises to behave and negotiates with his lawyers to come out. I don't know that Judge Merchan will actually do that, but that's if it wasn't Donald Trump and it was anybody else, that's what he would do. He would just put him in the back in a cell, and until he could control himself and behave. And even I'm sorry, even the most difficult, most dangerous, most violent, most just terrible defendants, even they can keep it under control in court. So hopefully Donald Trump has enough control over his emotions that he can do that. But if he can't, the judge has options. He can fine him, he can admonish him, but the nuclear option is to put him in. I don't know that will happen, but that is possible.
So, Karen, how much of the voir dire do you expect to get through today? There's a reading of the case of what the case is about. You got to organize all of the prospective jurors who are kind of coming in. What do you expect that we get through by the end of today?
It's unclear, because I don't know how many pre-trial issues they want to address. I think they get to they have to have the jury come in, and then there's going to be jurors who have all kinds of issues that they have to excuse, but I think they could potentially have picked a couple jurors by the end of the day. They're not going to have a full jury by any means, but there's a chance they may have picked a couple jurors by the end of the day. I suspect they will have a full jury by the end of the week, and that would be 12 jurors plus 6 alternates. And the alternates are there in case something happens to a juror, if they get sick or they decide that they just can't sit on this case anymore, and they just, things happen, right, to people. So they have 6 alternates just in case they need them. And the court doesn't sit on Wednesdays, so that's their calendar day where he hears other cases, and that's normal. And where there's a calendar day, and they don't hear cases one day a week typically when you have a trial. And so it's really Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and then the judge is not sitting for Passover, which is the following Monday, Tuesday, to accommodate any jurors with any family or any lawyers, etc., who observe Passover. And then the following Wednesday is his calendar. So I suspect you'll see openings a week from this Thursday. That would be my best guess. Although if they pick a quick jury, you could see openings as early as Friday. So that's also possible.
We're going to hear throughout the day as part of the voir dire process where the prospective jurors are questioned about whether they could be fair or impartial. I'm sure we'll hear a number of jurors talk about having very strong feelings towards Donald Trump, towards this case, and whether or not that impacts their ability to be fair and impartial. One of the questions that we received that I think is a really good one is how do the lawyers know when they're questioning people if they're actually telling the truth, though? What's preventing somebody during the voir dire process for saying, I could be fair and impartial, but they're actually secretly a right wing media junkie who's trying to get on this jury to help Donald Trump, or conversely, someone who says they can be fair and impartial because they want to make sure that they drive a guilty verdict? How are the lawyers grappling with that, right? Because how could you possibly tell if the jurors are being honest now? This is something that's not unique to this case, right? There's a lot of cases where most cases will have similar issues, although this is certainly a more let's say high profile one where the stakes are higher and more people may have their agendas to get on this jury. So how do you deal with that?
I mean, that as you point out, Ben, that's the case in all jury, right? In all jury selections, there's always going to be the concern that there's people who are trying to get out of jury duty, people who are trying to get on the case, and these are very experienced lawyers who know how to ask questions about things that people might not even realize it indicates certain things. I mean, they know how to do this. They know what questions they're asking for, but there's also research that they're going to do. Although this is an anonymous jury to us, the lawyers get to know who they are. And I guarantee that they will be, and their staff will be Googling these individuals and do everything they can to find out about them. So they'll find, I think, anyone who has extreme views. But, every person they come into to a trial and to jury selection as a human being. So they're going to have opinions. They're going to have either voted or not for Donald Trump, right, in the past. And it's okay, right? It doesn't, just because and I like to analogize it, everybody's against murder, right? But yet somehow you can find a fair and impartial juror to sit on a murder case and sometimes acquit, because it's not about the sensationalism of the actual event. It's not about your feelings one way or another about a particular thing. It's about whether you're somebody who can evaluate the evidence and promise that you will, no matter what, you will hold the people to their burden of proof, which is to prove each and every element of the crime beyond a reasonable doubt. And if they don't, even if you dislike the crime, you dislike the defendant, you have to promise that you will acquit. And I have found that jurors take that very seriously. If they didn't, you'd never see acquittals in cases. And there are acquittals, because if you don't meet your burden, you shouldn't get a conviction. And that's what the beauty of our system is. It's, everyone always says, now that I'm on the other side and I represent people, even though I was a prosecutor for a long time, now I'm in private practice. I believe so much in the jury system and in our system of advocacy. I don't think a prosecutor should win if they can't meet their burden. And I used to feel that way all the time when I was a prosecutor. And I believed it then and I believe it now. It's important that the system have integrity and that you prove your case, that people swear under oath. There's no hearsay allowed. You have to, people who saw it with their own eyes or participated in it. And juries take their role very seriously. I've spoken to jurors after they served, and I've even spoken to jurors who've acquitted just to hear about it. And it's funny, they any tricks that the lawyers try to do, they see past it all. They see past, what they see. They are in some ways the best truth tellers, and they can kind of credibility finders, and what the evidence actually is. And so I believe in the system. And so you're really looking for people, both sides are looking, well, I shouldn't say both sides. The prosecutor is looking for people who are going to be fair and impartial and just evaluate the evidence and not have strong opinions one way or another, so much so that they can't be fair, that no matter what the evidence is, their views are so strong that they're going to either convict or acquit because of their opinion about Donald Trump. But what Donald Trump's team is looking for, and what any defense team is looking for, is they're looking for that stealth juror that can disrupt, because again, it has to be unanimous. All 12 jurors have to find beyond a reasonable doubt unanimous. And all they need to do, if you're the defense, is convince one person who can hang that jury. And then that's obviously not great. So that's really what jury selection's about. And yeah, can somebody try and sneak on? They can, but I like to think that our system won't allow that, or at least it's rare and hopefully unlikely.
Karen, I want to do something a little bit self-serving here, but self-serving for the Midas Mighty community who's watching this. There are a lot of other networks now and organizations and groups that are doing their own coverage, and seems like they say it's the copying is the best form of flattery, if you will. So I've seen a lot of networks and organizations trying to do similar types of things in coverage here. This is the self-serving part, but again, it's more public information, I would say, than self-serving, which is you and I are going to be doing these updates every morning before court. So you'll just check in at the exact same time every morning, and you're going to get a Karen and Ben evaluation of what's going to happen that day. Then when court concludes, whenever that is, so you figure that should be around 4:45 Eastern, about 1:45 Pacific. We'll then do another video. We'll go live together and describe what went down that day, contextualize it, answer some questions as well. If people are wondering why they should be tuned into the Midas Touch Network, for some of the new people who are watching this, what's your pitch about the coverage that they are going to see here on the Midas Touch Network? And I will just say, because I know you're humble, I will make this pitch, that there is no one in the United States of America with the experience about the Manhattan District Attorney's Office like Karen Friedman Agnifilo, who worked there for nearly 30 years. When Karen first started there, she worked with Special Counsel Jack Smith. Karen rose to the number 2 position in the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, basically running the office and at times even serving as acting district attorney. So I think getting that firsthand inside experience in a very detailed and granular ways is important. But Karen, I want to hear your pitch as well to all the newcomers to this network.
Look, I feel like I'm the reveal codes, right? I can translate what's happening and what things mean for people in ways that if you don't practice there, you haven't practiced before Judge Marchand like I have, or you didn't. I mean, I know the prosecutors, I know the defense attorneys, not as well, the defense attorneys, but I know their reputations. I just know everything that's happening there. And so I'll be able to explain things. Others will be able to as well, but I'll be able to explain things in a way that's from an insider's perspective, as if I was, because I only recently left the DA's office 2 years ago. So I guess 2.5 years ago now, but so I haven't, it hasn't been that long. And so I think I'm going to be able to give a different real insider's perspective. I was a trial lawyer in the trial division and tried cases. So I, and like I said, I appeared before Judge Marchand many times. So I think that perspective is going to be a real insider's view that explains things in a way that you're not going to find everywhere. So.
Well, everybody, again, big day today. We will be giving also the normal hot take updates that we do here on the network. And Karen and I will see you at the end of court today, but keep checking in on the Midas Touch Network throughout the day, because as breaking news develops, we'll of course make sure to include those breaking news on the feed as well. Thank you all for watching. What a historic moment for the rule of law and for our country. And there's no one else I'd rather spend this with than you, Karen Friedman, Agnifilo, the whole Legal AF community, from Michael Popak and of course the Legal AFers watching, the Midas Touch pro-democracy, law and order community here. We'll see you soon. And let's get to that trial. Thanks for watching and have a good one, everybody. Shout out to the Midas Mighty.
Enough! Send it to the big house, not the White House. Get the new exclusive tees, mugs, and stickers right now at store.midastouch.com. That's store.midastouch.com.